evening and good evening to you, ladies and gentlemen. This is WeatherBrains, episode number 767. This is the pre-show for September 28th, 2020, the year that never ends. And you know what this is, the magical time of the show where we do three things. We share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and we say outrageous things. Yes, indeed, ladies and gentlemen. So I feel like I haven't done something. You know, the deal is you figure out what you haven't done when it doesn't happen. So, anyway, so let me get the embed code here and get everybody else going. And we'll get this thing started. Hope you're having a good day. Had some thunder here today, some thunderstorms. Thankfully, they stayed under severe limits, which is always a good thing. And it is nice and cool and crisp. Feels good outside. So here we go. Got the usual crew coming in. They have now been invited. And we are ready to rock and roll here. Don't want to see too much of my junk back here. And yes, I am wearing new glasses. These, for years I wore the little readers. 15 years. And I finally went to get an eye exam because I started to notice a little change in what I'm seeing at a distance. For years, I could see at a distance just little details that nobody else could see. But it started to degrade a little bit. So for the first time in my life, I got an eye exam. And they said, yeah, you're an old man and you need some glasses. So these are the progressive lens type glasses where if you look down, it's like you've got readers. When I'm looking at the computer here, it's intermediate. And then off in the distance, you've got a top lens. And I'm talking about being old and wearing glasses, Bill. It's kind of sad.
I've been wearing those for 20 years.
I noticed at a distance, it was starting to get a little fuzzy. And for the first time ever, and I got an eye exam for the very first time in my life. And he said, well, the good news, you don't have cataracts, you don't have, macular degeneration, you don't have any really bad stuff, but you really got to start wearing glasses. So
they said that to me in the first grade.
Hey, Don, can you hear us okay?
I don't need to invite Don. Thank you, Nate.
Hello, Tessa. Bill, can you hear me?
I can.
Wow. This is an old dude you're talking to. So I am ill at ease, anything beyond email. Well, no, that's an exaggeration.
Well, with the exception of Nate and Jen, this is a collection of old dudes, Don. So
yeah. Thanks for not calling me an old dude.
You're a cool dude, Jen.
I'm a cool dude.
Yeah, I'm gonna
Flavor Town.
And I watched last week's episode, which was the first time I've watched a whole. I enjoyed it. There's a lot more to sprites than that.
Don almost sounded sincere when he said that.
Hello, James. Very nice to meet you.
Don, you're a legend. You are an absolute legend. Wow.
Well, coming
on the show.
Coming from you, that's pretty amazing.
Oh, you're a big deal. So thanks for.
The only thing I don't trust about you and Jeff Renner are your voices. Meteorologists are not supposed to have pipes like you have.
Mine is total fake. The guy I worry about is a guy named Morgan Palmer who's in Seattle. Yeah. Listen to his voice. Oh,
I'm in a secret Facebook group with him and Nate, but I've never heard Morgan. I've never clicked on anything where I could actually listen to him.
Well,
you'll have to do that. You'll get to about 9 o'clock.
When Tony Rice, and I don't know if Tony has put a new file in for today. Let me check and see.
Yeah, we need one for Don. 10 o'clock.
I'll put last week's in here. Just you can hear his voice at the intro. This is last week's.
Okay.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice.
Come on, nobody should sound like that.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. Make you sound like an Irish tenor, you know.
I'm having some technical issues. I'll be right back.
Ooh.
All right.
Well, you're
either hair or voice, not Span. So.
Yeah.
I got neither.
All right, so we're still waiting on Troy and Kim, and we'll give them another minute or two here.
And we have to have Nate because Nate's in charge.
Okay, yeah, he hung up on us, and he only did the wise thing to do. He ran.
Yeah,
totally. He ran away.
I think he's going on another podcast with Norm Macdonald. Tell dirty jokes.
Wow. Why do I think we're going to get a whole bunch of show titles here during this segment? This is going to be good. So Jen, I do have your file, Jen. Thank you. And I don't have Tony. I don't have Tony's. So, and typically he sends me a little email if he can't produce one. So I'll just kind of watch it during the show and see if it magically pops in. All right.
I can just read his email that he sends every week to all the meteorologists.
That's true. All right, here's Troy, and we're waiting on Nate to show.
Good old Troy. Troy and I used to see each other every year at the AMS broadcast conference. I have not seen my friend Troy in quite a long time.
Don, it's so great to see you, buddy. It is really great to see you.
Same here. Always the friendly face, the friendly voice. And the knowledge.
Troy should not have that much hair at his age. I don't understand it. He looks like he's 29 or something.
No, believe me, it's being held together by hair dye. Trust me.
He does.
Okay.
Hair dye and Botox. That's a good show title.
Exactly.
I never did the dye because I had the fear of the sudden change. And so I tried Grecian formula, which works only on my mustache when you see it never did anything for this.
You learn a lot on this show. You learn a lot on this show.
Yeah, so don't waste your money.
All right, so Kim.
Well, James, you don't need to.
Yeah, that's right. You got that right. So Kim cannot be on the show tonight. So Nate, can you hear us? He's muted and we don't see his video.
And I thought this was good. I thought I was the one who's going to be.
Nate is a genius. He's
that's
the smartest guy of the group. I mean,
this was my great fear that I'd be the guy you couldn't connect with.
I mean, Don, you were one of the first ones on here. So, I mean, well, let's get this thing started. We're going to go ahead and roll it while Nate is getting his act together. So here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
WeatherBrains is brought to you by the great folks at Midland Weather Radio. Every home, school, and business should have a NOAA Weather Radio, the official voice of the National Weather Service.
Oh, this is WeatherBrains episode number 767, the weekly show that's all about weather, the longest running weather podcast in the universe. This is for September 28th, 2020, the year that never ends. But we've had some great shows this year. I mean, 2020 has not been good for some, but I think it's been pretty good for us. Aubrey, anytime you're here, it's going to be a good show. What's up?
You're too kind, James. You're too kind.
No, I speak the truth.
James, if you want to allow my screen share, I'll show you guys a fantastic photo that's come in from West Virginia, because this time of the year, you know what time of the year this is? That fall foliage.
I don't even know how to do that. I don't even know how I
normally
allow screen sharing.
Normally, it's heavy drinking time on Saturdays at West Virginia University, but I've been to a couple of games. I've been to a couple of games there when Rutgers was still in the Big East, and I saw some drinking.
Well, Don, I'll tell you what, you've given me a vacation spot to go to. Where exactly is that, West Virginia?
Morgantown.
Yes, up in the Panhandle. It's a couple hours
Aubrey,
away
I'm going to work on getting your screen share. So
I'll keep it up.
Give me a second here. Troy?
Yes, sir.
Troy, how cool is it? How cool is it in Austin tonight?
I'm happy. The cold front passed at 2 a.m. this morning in Austin, and we got a little sprinkle with it, which I really didn't expect, but little trace of rain with it as it came through. And our dew points now are in the mid 40s, mid and lower 40s now, and sitting at about 73, 74 currently at the airports. But I've got 68, 69 degrees at the co-op station here at the house. So really
Is that
pleasant.
a blue
It's
norther?
nice. Stepped outside. Yeah, exactly. Stepped outside, Don, just a few minutes ago, and really for Texas felt very, very comfortable. I feel like that I have to see Aubrey's picture, though, to make this complete. I have to have something visual. But I do have this feeling that maybe the worst of the summer is over. I didn't say the worst of the year, but I said the worst of the summer.
Have you gotten your pumpkin spice yet, though, is the question. It's only fall if you've had pumpkin spice.
I hate to say this, Nate, but I'm not a fan of pumpkin anything. Hey, look at Aubrey.
I'm with you on that, Troy.
I have to say though, I do love some pumpkin beer though, because you can get the
What?
cinnamon spices. Oh, it's so good. It's so good. All right, so can you guys see this beautiful rock formation?
Oh yeah,
Nice.
So this
fall
is
now. Yep.
Seneca Rocks, West Virginia. And if you love to travel, if you love to see the foliage, if you love to hike, put this on your list. You can hike to the top of this. I've done it before. They're rated as moderate. It's a lot of switchbacks, but it's definitely doable, and it's something that is worth doing. It is fantabulous. The view is incredible.
That's awesome.
Amazing.
It is a beautiful state.
It is.
Traveled through it quite a bit, actually, not just on the interstate.
Wow.
Hey guys,
awesome.
hey James, let me ask you about something else. We could save this to later as far as news, but anyone see on the social media today that our friend David Fenfrock up at Channel 5 in Dallas?
Snake.
It's my pick of the week. You can't have it.
Was it?
It's mine.
Oh, I'm sorry. Never
Mine.
mind. I just wondered. He's home, and that's good. But well, Nate will tell you more about it later. Pick of the week. So it's pretty amazing.
That's a good
story
tease.
today.
That's a good tease. You got to hang on. It involves a snake.
Yep.
It's a biting good time.
Oh, it's the year that bites. That's what I've heard all day long.
Hey, Jen, you ever been bitten by a snake before?
No, I hate them. No.
Now, I'll warn you, the snake lovers they're feisty. I mean, if you say anything bad about a snake, they will come at you fast and furious. In fact,
aren't those usually religious cults? You know, you should see black and white movies.
The snake lovers are. I used to post some pictures of snakes on my Facebag page, but I don't do that much anymore. So anyway, what's happening in Ohio, Jen?
We had the front come through too, and winds picked up. We needed some rain, and we got quite a bit in Marysville. We got just over 3/4 of an inch. So that was good. Nice soaker. Now the cooler air is here. It's in the 50s right now, and it's definitely going to be autumn days for the next few days. So I'm liking it, actually.
And Bill Murray, we had faux pas here about 4 o'clock this afternoon. Always exciting to have a faux pas.
Better than a faux pas.
Exactly.
Those are coming.
Lord, this is the home of it.
Let's give it time.
Nate, let's bring in Don here. I mean, we've got a legend on the show here. I can't wait. I got 2.3 million questions for this man.
Well, that's good. So our guest tonight is
back in Jersey.
Yeah. So our guest tonight is a Buffalo television legend, and needs no introduction, but we'll try it anyway. He's worked 40 plus years in the market. He's worked in every TV station there.
TV. In Buffalo, I've been here since '84.
Been there since '84. Which is a long time. That's 36 years, if my math serves me here. He tried to retire, and then they brought him back. So, Don Paul, welcome to the program. Glad to have you with us.
Well, thanks. Just for perspective, I'm still mostly retired. They brought me back at WIVB for some fill-in work because they were down to 3 meteorologists. And now that they have a 4th, I suspect I shall crawl back into my shell most of the time. But I do write 3 articles a week for the Buffalo News online edition on weather and climate. And that doesn't pay very well, but it's a lot of fun. It keeps this thing going a little bit.
Yeah, there you go. Nothing wrong with that. So tell us to start off with, we'll get into the career, I think, a little bit, but I want to start, this is WeatherBrains, not TV meteorology brains. So I want to start with the weather and what it we just had the beautiful picture of West Virginia. What's the weather like for those that have never been to Western New York? Tell us a little bit about it. I know they have occasionally some big snows in the wintertime, maybe a kind of a thing.
Now and then. Well, actually, Buffalo, when I first moved here, the MIC gave me some statistics on our average sunshine from May to September. And that's the opposite kind of lake effect, where for a good part of the summer months until the lake gets warmer than the air, Buffalo is the sunniest city most years of Northeast large cities. But from November to March, it's frozen Seattle. It's a pretty cloudy place. And when I was first recruited to come to WIVB, the consultant for WIVB, I was working in Detroit as a number 2 guy, doing weather on weekends and science reporting 3 days a week. And the consultant for Channel 4 was based in the Detroit area, read in the Free Press that I really wanted a number 1 gig. I didn't use that phrase. And so they called me from this consultancy and told me they thought they had the perfect opening in a media market. Detroit back then was the 7th market. And they kept telling me it was a perfect fit, but this woman on the phone didn't tell me where it was. And finally I said, well, it sounds good. She said, it'll pay more than you'd think for a media market, et cetera, if they like you. I said, well, where is it? And she said, Buffalo, like that. And I remember my exact words, but I remember saying, didn't it occur to you that a meteorologist might like the idea of a lot of snow in the winter? Just, darn, I didn't think that through. So it turned out to be a great fit. Working in Detroit, as most of you could probably figure out pretty quickly, Detroit does not get much lake effect. We get downslope flurries left over from lakes Michigan and Superior, and rarely on the northeast flow off Huron, a little bit, a skinny, weak lake effect, and almost never off Lake Erie. So I had 2 months off between jobs, and back then that was in the WSFO days of the Weather Service, and I had time to drive out to the Ann Arbor forecast office a few times, and they had all the weather and forecasting back issues, and not the MIC, but the number 2 guy there was nice enough to find some good papers on lake effect, and I began reading about it and realized, oh man, I don't really know much at all beyond the basics. And then when I got to Buffalo in August, the MIC, who's still with us, he's not the MIC, Don Wirch, invited me out. He said, you have to live it to really understand it. And he gave me a great decision tree paper written for the old WSOs in Rochester and Syracuse. And it had been co-authored by the great Tom Nizzle. And it saved me in my first lake effect blizzard, which came in January. And there hadn't been a bona fide blizzard warning in Buffalo since up here, the famous blizzard of 77, which was almost entirely a ground blizzard. And I wasn't here then, I was working in Wichita. But this decision tree paper told me which towns were lined up with which vectors. And, as you all would figure, well, it's not good enough to know the winds are from the southwest. If they're from 250 degrees, all other things being equal, not too much shear between 850 and 500 millibars, that band goes straight through downtown Buffalo out to the airport. And if it's really well organized, it goes out to Batavia and gets closer to Rochester. If it's 255 degrees, it misses downtown Buffalo, but gets South Buffalo. And these 5-degree increments, when I got here, of course, we were just getting ready to leave the LFM, which looked at the lakes as flat plains. And I used to talk to clubs, and they said, were people stupid then? And I said, no, the meteorologists knew they were lakes, but there was no computer crunch power to make them lakes back then. And the NGM couldn't really do that, so that the wind forecast could be wildly off. But at least it was more than just looking upwind at the soundings and the surface obs. You had something to go by. And when that first blizzard came along, the wind forecast wasn't that good, but at least as the band began to oscillate, I could figure out very quickly with Tom Nizzle's paper which towns are going to get hit when the winds veer to 255 and then to 260. And it turned out to be a synoptic mesoscale hybrid, and it was an easy call. It was a ferocious storm, 2-day event over a 3-day period. And I can use the braggadocious phrase, I nailed it, but so did the National Weather Service. And I came in, now this will show you how old I am. I came in on the Monday of that week, and I had like a 99 fever, and I was kind of blah because nothing had happened that winter, and it's mid-January. And in that era, the Salt Lake City Western Regional Headquarters used to put out every afternoon what is now like the extended discussion from NCEP. It was called the Long Wave Discussion. And I had this 99 fever, and I'm reading this on a Monday, and it says the upper air beginning to evolve ominously in an analogous pattern to that of December 76, January 77. Well, my fever, boom, it was gone. I mean, the adrenaline just flowed all week, and we hyped it within the limits of science. And it was a good forecast, and it worked out great. And I came home when it went into a lull late Saturday night. I'd done a live shot at the airport with our female anchor. And I lived on a cul-de-sac, all new houses. And all the children were like 4 and 5 years old. Everybody's up having a giant party with grills going and celebrating this storm. And I'm thinking, this is nirvana. This is where I want to live. And when I came here, I thought, well, I'll stay here a few years and try to fight my way back to a top 10 market. Never crossed my mind again. So that was a great start to help put me on the map and make it possible for my 2 daughters, who are, now way grown up, to go to a great school system. Like many of you have had that experience in your communities. And that was just a wonderful move to come to Buffalo. It's worked for me very well. And even now when I write climate articles, I don't seem to see any hate comments in the Buffalo News. I used to see a few. They seem to have, either no one's reading me anymore, they've just petered out. So there's my typically long-winded answer. So in my case, and when I got to Rutgers, everyone had been turned on by the same TV weatherman on WNBC before he went to WABC and developed, unfortunately, a drinking problem, Tex Antoine. And he got so excited about nor'easters. And WNBC was 1 floor above the old U.S. Weather Bureau at 30 Rock. And that Nate, I got to bring Nate up. Back then, the WSR 57 was up on the 66th floor. So I found this was just like 2 weeks ago, I found an old picture of the radome, and back then it was the RCA building. And within a day, Nate posts a picture of himself standing next to that radome, a recent picture. It's still there. And Nate, would you guess that they were just afraid to disassemble it because it was 66 stories up? And there's a lot of unimaginable ground clutter. Watching TV weather, no matter what the meteorological conditions were, the ground clutter went 40 miles in all directions because that beam was bouncing off the Empire State Building and the Chrysler Building.
Yeah, it's I haven't gotten the straight dope on that as to whether it's the building has some historical significance now. And so I haven't been able to get a straight answer as to whether some people say it so they can't take the radar down because, it's part of the facade now and it would change the look of the skyline.
Well, no one on the ground can see it.
Yeah, and you're right. You wouldn't know. I mean, if you're standing on West 50th and or West 49th, either one, looking up, you're not going to see it. But if you do take the tour up to take the elevator and go up to the top floor. And then you can walk around and there's a couple of observation decks. They call it Top of the Rock. And you can, if you go up to the top floor, and if the weather's nice enough, they don't let you do that if the weather is kind of dicey. But if you're up there on a day where the weather's nice, you can get up there and actually look at it from a bit of a distance. I think it's just more one of those, it would cost them more to take it down than it's worth. It's not hurting anything there.
Just think of a radar 66 stories up, the meteorological negativity in a lot of ways. Yeah. But they wanted it in New York City. And now the only radar I ever got to see as an undergrad, we took a field trip to the RCA building and didn't get to see the radar. The Weather Bureau didn't become the Weather Service till 1970, had a remote monitor with a glass door where tourists on this mezzanine could look through the door. And as a little kid, I was like most of you, I was already a weather nut. And my mother took me during Christmas vacation to Radio City. And I see this door and it says U.S. Weather Bureau. And I was too shy to knock on the glass. And years later, during this field trip, this older meteorologist said, "Why do you think we had that there? We would have loved to have a visitor." And then he told me this story about this weatherman, Tex Antoine, who was a station staff announcer in the late 40s and an artist. And they were just starting the first local newscast and asked him, would he like to try to do a weather show? And of course, he didn't know anything about weather. But what this older fellow said, we began tutoring him, and he began bringing us, after the 6 o'clock newscast, deli sandwiches and coffee. And in whatever, late 40s, early 50s dollars, deli sandwiches were just as expensive then relative to those dollars. Yeah. But Antoine was so grateful for the tutoring, and he fell in love with weather and did things that I would never have been able to do. He had an easel, and he drew the Greek letter omega one night. I still remember this, and explained what an omega block was. And he would get very technical from his tutorials he received from his buddies at the Weather Bureau. And back then it was buddies, there weren't any females there. And so one year at the AMS conference, Harvey Leonard and me and everyone else who grew up in the New York area were all telling Tex Antoine stories, how much he meant to us as kids. In New York City, TV didn't actually get a bona fide meteorologist until sometime in the 60s. Number one market, where Boston, right from the beginning, it depends on the heritage of the marketplace, what the audience is used to.
So in terms of weather in Buffalo, and by the way, I think we're coming back to the radar thing for just a second. It's funny now that once the Weather Service retired that radar and moved on to NextRad, WNBC bought it, refurbed it, and it was their radar for a while. And now WNBC's radar is now at Rutgers, where you went to school.
Yeah, which makes me insanely jealous. And Nate, you know more about that radar than I do, but it's not a low cost radar.
No.
And it's in a much better position for frontal systems and squall lines coming from Pennsylvania and the Catskills. And one of the reasons the Weather Service is out in Suffolk County is due to Buffalo. When we were going to be high on the list for the modernization, and one of the earlier Doppler radars, the original list didn't seem to have any link with who needs this worst. Now, I would have guessed Norman would get it first, and Buffalo would be way down on the list, because while we need radar, we have not that much severe weather. Buffalo was high on the list, but then an adjunct ophthalmologist at the SUNY Medical School at Buffalo started a scare campaign that the side lobes were going to cause cancer and birth defects. And he was a ham radio operator. And we had a medical reporter at WIVB who was the pathology professor at SUNY Buffalo. And he said, I'm not a radiologist, but he's getting a lot more side lobe radiation from his ham tower than he'll ever get from a weather radar. And they were going to move the Buffalo office to Batavia, which is in Genesee County, about 40 miles northeast, 35 miles. And they had a scary meeting, which included the original Buffalo meeting notes. Then they were considering for a while moving it to Erie because there was so much resistance. Finally, the Erie County legislature invited our medical reporter, the professor, who a wonderful friend, and me, and everyone sat around and they agreed to site it at the airport, which is where the original 57 was. But the meeting notes, the scare meetings, went into the negotiations for where the Weather Service New York office was going to relocate. And it ended up somewhere near the Brookhaven National Laboratories, because there were a lot of places closer to the city that got frightened thanks to the Buffalo meetings. And those meeting notes also went out to LA. And then on top of the scare stories, this is one of the funnier stories that some of you may have heard. At the time, Larry Hagman of Dallas fame, and
I was wondering if you were going to bring him up.
Yeah,
I dream of Jeannie.
major drinking problem. By his own admission, he came clean. He developed liver cancer, and he tried to blame it on Doppler radar, which hadn't even been really in operation for very long at all. Got a temporary restraining order from some district court judge, which lasted all of 3 days. As soon as the judge looked it over more carefully, I guess they called in some expert witnesses and said, this is ridiculous. And Oxnard, or wherever it is exactly cited out there, went into operation. So Buffalo is kind of the locus for madness.
So going back to lake effect snow for a second, I remember I sort of had thought about lake effect snow and how cool it would be and everything, but I hadn't really thought about some of the just crazy totals and snowfall rates until a colleague of mine, when I was still in Raleigh, Greg Fischel, talked our management into just up in one day saying, send me to Buffalo so I can basically stand in this crazy snow. And it was one of those days where the system, it was going to be like 2 or 3 days of it. It wasn't just a one and done thing. And managed to talk the GM into ponying up to send him and a photog up to the lake shore to basically cover it and to talk about how narrow these snow bands were and how crazy the snow rates were and thunder snow and everything else.
Yeah, and on that trip, he spent a few hours with me, taping an interview with me, went out to the Weather Service too. And I remember saying, Greg, how did you get the station to pony up the money for this? And he says, I'm not really sure.
Yeah, Don, this is fascinating stuff. And I mean, we've talked to a lot of folks about lake effect snow, and just the stuff you shared so far has been amazing. And I want to hear about some of the bigger storms, because I know Jen's a big fan, Aubrey's a big fan of weather history, but so talk about those in a minute, like Armageddon and, the 2001 December system. But I was interested to see that you have such a long growing season there, long enough to have, a lot of fruit trees and wineries and things like that.
Yeah,
so
close
does that
to
happen?
the lakes. Yeah, close to Lakes Ontario and Erie. There are loads of wineries. And when I first got here, most of the wine was very low end wine. And now there are some new varietals that are a little more sophisticated, unlike the wine that I drink. which comes in a rhomboid shaped container, or at least it looks like a rhomboid after I've been drinking it a while. But we had a widespread killing frost inland last week, but no problems at the wineries or the fruit farms, just because of their proximity to the still warm lakes. Eventually they'll get theirs, but they do have that longer season, where if you go well inland, it's a much shorter season.
Is that why they call it Orchard Park? Is that
I don't know why they call it. There are no orchards, and I lived there for a few years in a previous marriage, and there were no orchards. There weren't any orchids either, but there are no orchards in Orchard Park. It's actually a very nice town, but I don't know how it got that name.
So talk about that December, is it 2001 snow blitz that happened?
Yes.
I guess you went through that one.
Yes, and that storm is one of the reasons that I explain to people I don't do seasonal outlooks. I don't think the verification scores, and CPC would be the first to admit it, I think, at a conference, are all that impressive. But there's no meteorologist, not even you people, who can say in October this winter's just basically going to be milder than average, and you can hardly touch precipitation. But no one can predict in October or late September that some other variables, and I'm not sure what they were back then. I remember Tom Nizzle called me on Thursday before Christmas week, and he said, have you been looking at, the models for next week, the upper air? And I said, yeah, it looks pretty interesting. And he said, holy blank. He says, yeah, I'm figuring we could see amounts over 4 feet because the southwest flow is going to be so persistent into and near the metro area. And he really nailed it a day ahead of me or anyone else, because his adrenaline was flowing. And unlike some people, when the adrenaline flows, he does the science. He doesn't just say, here's what I'm going with, I'm going with my gut. And that winter, other than that week in which the airport, Buffalo, picked up 82 inches, which made it also the snowiest month in record keeping history, going back to 1871. The rest of the winter had mostly above average temperatures and very modest snowfall. When you look at the season totals, of course, we finished up above average. I think it was about 132 inches, and our average is currently about 93, 94 at the airport. Less downtown because early in the season, the lake's too warm. And so if I were to still be on the air, and I said in October, I'm going with this moderate La Nina, which correlates pretty well in the old days before these new variables began to loom larger, with a milder than average winter in this region. A week like that comes along. Anyone who remembers what I said in October said, that guy is nuts. He doesn't know what he's doing. So if I don't have to do a seasonal outlook, and I certainly don't now, I don't. And I've written quite a few articles on the limits of what we can realistically do. I went after, politely, like so many of you have, I went after AccuWeather 2 weeks ago in the Buffalo News for the absurdity of the 45 and 90-day daily forecast. And, the realistic limits are maybe 2 weeks in the future. And then you come to that soft wall of chaos theory. And I thought I did a pretty good explanation of why chaos reigns, and actually got some good feedback on my Facebook page, some personal messages. I'm glad you explained that to me. I always knew the Farmer's Almanac was silly, but I wasn't exactly sure why. And of course I mentioned the Farmer's Almanac. So that week, more than 2 or 3 weeks in a row, the NAO prediction in 2001 was not a refined science. And, the NAO and the AO, which I wasn't even at that stage of my career paying enough attention to. I knew about it, went super negative. I don't have the numbers, but I mean, that was one of the things Tom looked at and said, man, this is going negative. But there's no way you could have predicted that more than 2 weeks, 3 weeks tops in terms of temperature. You can't begin to locate how much wind shear there will be with lake effect bands. We're going to get lake effect rain here starting late tomorrow night and Wednesday. But there are some signs there'll be periods of pretty decent directional shear. And the bands, the dynamics look good until you look at the shear, and then you say, could get locally heavy rain, but these bands could fall apart for hours at a time. And so here we are in this wonderful year. And I still don't have high confidence on how heavy the lake effect rain will be. Fortunately, it's not a critical forecast for me anyway, since I'm writing forecasts for the newspaper.
I think it's interesting that we talk about, lake effect snow gets all of the press, but lake effect rain is also a thing early in the season.
Yes. And there was a great, when I got here in 84, we had an intern at WIVB who went on to get his master's at Penn State, and he co-authored a terrific paper many years ago on lake effect rain. And he had great graphics for that era. And yeah, I knew about lake effect rain, but he really went academic on it and had some great examples I lived through, but didn't pay that much attention historically, climatologically, that put down some incredible amounts of rain. And Wednesday would be a pretty good setup if it weren't for the question of how much directional shear there's going to be. I have an article that went online today for the news, and the headline says, "From the 80s today to lake effect." And then my first sentence was, I'm talking about lake effect rain, put down the pitchforks.
And you mentioned the 1977 blizzard. I know you weren't there then, but you said it was a ground blizzard mostly. Explain what that means, Don.
Well, December of 76 and January of 77 had been extraordinarily cold throughout the Ohio Valley and the Great Lakes. And the snow just kept piling up. People in Buffalo think it all came in off the Lake Erie ice. The lake froze incredibly early, but the blizzard actually impacted all 8 counties, and very seldom the MIC, when I got here, told me about it. Back then, NOAA used to put out that national weather summary every 6 hours on the weather wire.
Yep.
And I remember in Wichita, we had 1 6-inch snowfall that winter. Nothing was going on. And I'm reading this every 6 hours on January 28th and 29th. Man, would I love to be there? That sound like fun. Well, actually, there were people who had a lot of fun, but there also were 29 deaths, mostly people who froze to death in their cars. But the radar, for much of the time, showed almost nothing, since it doesn't pick up blowing snow down on the ground. PIREPs, I spent 3 years here at WGRZ from 88 to 91, and the meteorologist who had been there, John Chandick, had gotten a hold of the Service A reports from January 28th. And I'm seeing these PIREPs that are more verbal than usual, where pilots are just amazed. Brilliant blue, ground blizzard in progress, cannot see the surface, bright sunshine, no clouds, because the lake was frozen. And you can get some lake effect snow through fissures in the ice, but it was so frozen that wasn't happening much. So there's only a rough estimate of maybe 12 new inches of snow, falling snow, through that whole event, which lasted several days. And then Jimmy Carter had to send in federal troops to help with the snow removal. And all that snow was packed so tight from the driving winds. And the old wind chill indices were in the minus 60s, minus 70s. I don't know, I guess that'd be minus 30s and minus 40s with the more accurate wind chill. But it's, as far as I can tell, it's a once in a lifetime event. There are no historical records. Maybe something happened in the 1800s of anything like that ground blizzard. And the drifts went up 3-4 stories in a lot of places where people were rescuing other people. Good-hearted people had snowmobiles and were digging people out of their houses so they could get some food to them. Just an amazing and bitter event. And so every year I get, you think this will be the winter? You think it'll happen again? It'll happen right after I die,
Those are my main ones. You can continue your thread.
Yeah,
I've got a million
blizzard of
more, but I
85
just am fascinated to listen to Don talk.
Yeah, the blizzard of 85, that one that I first encountered, was a doozy. We had 15 or 16 inches on a Saturday. And our station, we had a meeting with our consultant in Buffalo near the station on a Saturday morning in this restaurant, and the curtains were drawn. So, and I told everyone it was pouring out ahead of the cold front. And I'd been forecasting all week. Once this front goes by, whoa. And they wouldn't take a break from these tapes. And finally I said, can I just get up and take a look? Because I knew the front had to be through because I could hear the wind outside. And I opened the curtain a little, and I couldn't see across the street. And I go, yes. And everyone else is going, oh no. And the consultant says, guess what you're doing tonight? I came to the meeting with not a thought. I brought a parka to ride in my car, didn't even bring a hat. And he said, you are going to work tonight, and you're going out with Jackie Walker, the anchor. You're going to do a live shot at the airport. And we drove out in the teeth of this thing. And, you know, when I worked in Detroit, all the trucks, the news trucks, had 4-wheel drive. Here I am in the snowiest large city in America, which it is, and all of the news vans are rear-wheel drive vans. Are there any more unstable vans you could have in this climate? I'm saying, and the general manager at the time, who's no longer with us, so I won't mention his name, he made this brilliant purchasing decision. So we're driving to the airport in a total whiteout, and the chief photographer, he's going kind of fast. And his name was Don. I said, Don, aren't you going fast? And he said, if I slow down, we're dead. And then he said, no, really, we'll stall and there'll be no way to get going. And you see any trucks out here? You see anyone plowing, you know?
Yeah.
So that one, we were getting gusts of 55, 60. Then the snow shifted into the hills, the ski country, and came back on Monday morning. And that's when the blizzard warning got issued, because it was just ferocious. And the 6 or 7 a.m. temperature at the Buffalo airport was a record 10 below. So it was fine, powdery snow. And there were some loads of blowing snow, of course, but there was plenty of falling snow, because even on the old radar, you could see this band. And we had Snowvember in 2014, where some of the southern suburbs in the hilly terrain got 7 feet of snow over a 2-day period. And this, I never saw such stationarity. That was the fancy word we were using on the air. This band was like a Gillette blue blade. Channel 4, WIVB, is at the north end of Buffalo. We got about 4 inches of snow. South Buffalo got 48 inches.
Oh.
And and then in the hills to the south, up confirmed and reliable spotters, they were really careful with average measurements, 7 feet. And no one is going to say that. Then Governor Cuomo came to town, of course, and he thought the forecasting could have been better. And by the way, I am not a Governor Cuomo hater, but I went after him, and Associated Press picked it up. I said the Weather Service over the weekend, because this was a Tuesday event, I think, their AFDs were outstanding. They said paralyzing amounts are going to fall and bring everything to a complete standstill. It can be a life-threatening storm. They did a great job. Of course, they didn't say up to 7 feet. Who's going to say up to 7 feet?
Yeah.
Maybe in Nepal, but
I mean, at what point, you know, we have here in North Carolina, you know, it gets 3-4 inches, and anything more than that is just bragging rights. But the town's ground to a halt, you know, at 3 inches, you're done, at least for a day. And, you know, it's just a matter of timing. I remember we had our big 20-inch snowfall back in January of 2000. And, you know, that night, you know, we'd already blown through the original, every possible forecast that we thought we would get. We'd already blown through that by midnight. And at that point, it's just piling on and, you know, adding days to the end of the, you know, the snow outage and the number of snow days you were going to get. Cool. I had a question, though. So you mentioned Tom Nizzle, and those who have been paying attention through weather history over the last few years know that the Weather Channel for a while hired Tom Nizzle to sort of transition out of the Weather Service. One of the things that the Buffalo National Weather Service office was known for was naming winter storms, something the Weather Channel now does. Can you tell us a little bit about how that worked?
Well, I don't know if that's how it came to be at the Weather Channel. I'm not sure. I never asked Tom that. I haven't been in touch with him nearly as much in the last few years. He's retired now, although you can follow him on Facebook. He does some great posts, and his passion for weather hasn't diminished one bit. The Weather Service office here named them, but didn't make a big deal out of the names. It was partly for their record keeping. Sitting around in the conference room. Which one was that? Oh, that was, Omega, or some years it was insects. So I don't know if there's a direct connection, but he taught me more than he'll ever know. We were friends. He treated me as a peer, and this is not false humility. I am not Tom's peer. I mean, his level of knowledge, again, not false humility. It's just at a completely different level. And for the Atlanta and Salt Lake Olympics, he was one of the forecasters the Weather Service chose to be the key forecasters. He taught many snow courses for the Weather Service, not just regionally, but he'd get a leave for a couple of weeks to go out and teach. A truly gifted meteorologist. So I used to call him the Prince of Lake Effect. And in my mind, he still is. And anytime there's a threat of lake effect, even though he now lives in the mountains of Tennessee, if there's a threat up here between Oswego and Buffalo, he still goes into heat and melts all the damn snow.
So Don, talk for a second about Buff Kit. That's a famous thing, and it came out of the Weather Service in Buffalo, and that's a cool thing.
That started to develop in-house, and Tom was one of the developers, and I have no idea, because my level of modeling knowledge is just not there, how they began. It was originally designed just for lake effect, but then after they worked with it a while, they began to realize that this could be applied, since lake effect is a convective event, to warm weather mesoscale events too. And then Buffalo was fortunate enough to get a Sioux who grew up here, and now he runs the Warning and Decision Training Center in Norman, Ed Mahoney, who studied under Howie at Oklahoma, a true genius. And he took it to the next level. And when they were first developing it at Buffalo, the MIC told me that they were catching heat from Eastern Regional Headquarters saying, this isn't what we pay you to do. You have enough to do without developing a model. Then years after it was being used and all across the country, Howie Bluestein came to Buffalo, and he was pushing one of his great books. He came to the Science Center, but he came out to the Weather Service for a few hours, and they were nice enough to invite me to come and listen to him. And he said, believe it or not, I have not used BuffKit very much. And Ed Mahoney, who had been a grad student under Howie, did a great, highly technical presentation. And Bluestein said, I have to say, this is the best work I have ever seen come out of a forecast office. And by that point, Norman had taken it over to administrate it. He said, but there are some problems here, and here. And he found some microphysics things he wasn't sure he liked, but he was shaking his head. He said, I'm embarrassed to say I haven't been using this in my toolbox. And from this day on, it's in my toolbox. So we were lucky to have Mahoney here. And the last I heard, he's still down in Norman, one of the nicest people you could ever he once scared me at an AMS broadcast conference. He was doing a presentation on the model on BuffKit. And he said, I'd like Don Paul to come up here and help me. Well, oh, no. And he had me come up, but he made it so easy. And he could tell I was really sweating while I was cracking jokes, and he didn't embarrass me at all. I mean, he was kind of another Howie. But his wife grew up in Oklahoma, and she didn't want to stay in Buffalo forever, so he took the Norman gig. I think he's still there. I hope he is.
So Don, obviously Buffalo not a hotbed for tornadoes, but can you give me a little bit of some history of severe weather or tornadoes in that area? How often does it happen? And what was one of the strongest tornadoes that actually went through that area?
Well, the city of Buffalo has never had a tornado that anyone has observed. And it's mainly thanks to Lake Erie. In my first spring, May 31st, 1985, was one of the largest supercell tornado outbreaks that the Northeast ever had, and the part of Ohio, Ontario. And within the limits of the models back then, this was a well forecast setup. And I remember we talked about it the day before. No, you couldn't say too much 2 or 3 days in advance. I remember saying something, we're gonna have to keep an eye on this low. And that day, that Friday, the lake temperature was still, I think, at Buffalo in the upper 50s, but the air temperature at the airport, I think, reached about 84, 85. And the cap wouldn't break over Ohio. And, you know, I came in, I didn't do the noon. I did the 6 and the 11. There weren't any 5s yet then. And I ran crawls at 12:30 saying everyone should be on alert for a severe weather outbreak later today. And then nothing was happening. And, you know, we had a primitive, I must have been a ghost tap. We didn't have the greatest satellite photos, but just nothing was showing up. And then finally, 4:30, all hell began to break loose in Northeast Ohio. And there were a couple of, back then it was still the F scale, F4s and at least one F5. I think there were 2 in Pennsylvania. One went through a state park in the town of Albion, Pennsylvania, which is not too far from Erie. Lost, I don't remember what the death toll was, but these storms were heading on a path that would take them into our southern counties first. And the Weather Service, since we still had the 57, just did they took the precaution and they issued a tornado warning at around, I don't know, 5:30 for every county, because they were moving fast. And one of the supercells moved into this county, Chautauqua County, which is the far southwest corner, the county south of Erie County. And it did some damage, but we had no fatalities or injuries. It started to intersect the Lake Erie breeze, and you never saw supercells fizzle so quickly. But all in all, the storms that didn't impact that Lake Erie breeze resulted in a death toll that day in Ontario, Pennsylvania, and I don't know how many people died in Northeast Ohio, but the total loss of life was 88. And we didn't have any deaths or injuries thanks to Lake Erie. Now, most of the stronger tornadoes that occur here occur south of the Buffalo metro area, where there are days where the Lake Erie breeze doesn't get to them. We've never had an EF4 in my years here. We may have had an EF3. We've had a few EF2s. We had a pretty decent tornado this summer. But it's funny, when WIBB was bought by another company, which doesn't exist anymore, Nate, I'm sure, has heard of them, Lynn Television, they bought us an ADC Collins Doppler radar without asking us, but we were thrilled. Wow, we're going to have our own radar. And this thing, I think, Nate, maybe 250 watts. Am I right?
We had one, Don. The antenna was about the size of a kitchen garbage can lid.
Yeah,
and I think the peak power was about 300 watts. It was an aircraft radar.
Yeah, it was. And once I was at the Weather Service, and one of the wise guys there, one of my fellow wise guys, says, what do you think the beam width on that radar you have is? And I said, Pennsylvania. It wasn't that bad on close-in precipitation, but there were a lot of days where I knew there was snow falling in the southern tier counties where the ski resorts are, but the radar just couldn't pick it up at all. So I wouldn't put it on the air. I'd put on the Weather Service radar, because I'm not going to go on the air knowing it's snowing in Olean, New York, and there's nothing showing on our radar, make myself an even bigger idiot than I already was. So there were a lot of days I didn't use it, but one day, I remember the date, June 2nd, 1998, we had the first ADC with velocity data. It had 6 levels. I mean, the only reason I even knew much about velocity was because I had taken the Weather Service Laserdisc module on the 88D.
Yes.
With Les Lemon, and that really saved me from being a total moron. And you may remember, you had to take exams all along the way to go to the next section.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't fake it. And I was shocked that I got a good final grade on the final. But anyway, this radar has 6 levels for velocity. The manual says nothing about how many meters per second this color is. So I called this technician, and he said, well, it's not in your manual. I'll get back to you. And he called me back the next day and he says, we have nothing on that. I said, you don't have any information about how many meters per second, what the shear is? He says, no, we just stepped it up when they were developing it. And so here it is, June 2nd, and it's a real severe weather day. And some rotation started to show up over Ontario, crossed the Niagara River, skipped over Buffalo entirely, started to come down in far eastern Erie County, and then landed on this road that cuts across Wyoming County and put down an EF2. But when it was happening, it's the only time I remember putting that velocity data on the air, because I was worried about this cell that was turning into a supercell. And I said, this storm looks to me as if it's capable of producing a tornado. And if you live on Route 20A, east of what I'm showing, because it was live radar, you should seek shelter now. Well, as I finished that sentence, the NOAA tone alert radio went off, and they were issuing a tornado warning. And the damage survey showed it was an EF2. No injuries, it destroyed a few buildings. So that crummy little radar did its job that day, much to my shock. But I worked a year in Wichita, and it was a quiet year. And I worked opposite Mike Smith. Some of you know who Mike is. Am I right, Nate?
We know Mike.
Yeah, and his weekend guy was Gary Shore. And when I was in Wichita, that was Gary's first TV job. And he was really having trouble learning how to do the showbiz part of the job. He had been an instructor in synoptics at the University of Michigan. He went to NYU when NYU actually had a good undergrad program. They haven't had it for decades. And then he got a master's at Penn State. And we lived in the same apartment complex. And so we made a symbiotic deal. I coached him on learning to smile more and loosen up. And he coached me on how to read the LFM, because the LFM didn't exist when I was at Rutgers. It was in research, but in my opinion, he turned me into a better synoptician. And he had a genius inside of him, a strange character as he got older, but he was truly gifted. And even when Howie came, I say Howie like I'm pals, but he actually said he prefers Howie Bluestein. I asked him about Gary, because Gary presented a paper once at the AMS conference where he and Bluestein went chasing with a big crew, and they had a polite argument about which supercell to chase. And Gary picked the right one. And Bluestein said, well, he's kind of aggressive, but he has a real gift. And Joe Schaefer, the head of the National Severe Storms Forecast Center for many years, said the same thing about Gary. So that was a symbiotic friendship that continued. Once a year, we'd see each other at the AMS conferences, and it continued until his untimely demise. And it was very sad.
Gary was like only 55 years old when he died, right?
Yeah. And, when I first knew him, he'd sometimes smoke a little something. He'd bring home reams of Service A, and to relax, he would do hand analyses at home, just for the hell of it, And he'd have a little smoke. But then he evolved into something altogether different when he got older, with some religious dogma, where he tried to combine some real doctrinaire religious stuff with meteorology. And it was very strange. And Joe Schaefer invited me to sit at his table for lunch one day. And he didn't really know me. He said, there's a reason I asked you to sit here. I see you're friends with Gary, aren't you? And I said, yeah, we've been friends since the mid-'70s. He goes, what happened to that boy? Which was really kind of sad. But I owe him an awful lot.
Hey, Don, real quick, what advice do you want to give young TV meteorologists in their 20s that want to have a long, storied career like you? What's your advice?
Do something else.
Well, I was so fortunate, coming along in my generation, where you could have a lot more fun with freewheeling discussions on the air. And I remember once one of Maggid's people said to me, really one of their better consultants, he said, you know, some of the stuff you talk about, I would tell some of our younger meteorologists, don't do that. You're going to lose people. But he said, you know, I've got your numbers, and I'm sure some of your audience doesn't know what you're saying. And I didn't get that technical. He says, but it's working for you, so I'm not going to mess with you. And I hope that the younger women and men will get consultants and management that give them as much freedom. You know, I've had some bad bosses, everyone has, but no one ever tried to turn me into someone I'm not. So it's the ultimate cliche. You've got to be yourself. I can be silly, and it came easily to me on quiet weather days. But if you're not funny, don't try to be funny. And if your delivery is overly energized, it's going to sound like you're trying to be a top 40 jock from the 1970s, you know, on AM radio.
Hey,
Yeah,
we got all the hits right here. Yeah.
You need to be energized, but it's got to be a natural flow. And you're going to be doing a lot more things at once than I ever had to do, because we didn't have, for a big part of my career, social media. You weren't worried about getting everything on Twitter and getting the crawls on. You were more focused on singularity for getting the warnings out. So I feel not just for the young meteorologists, but for the backpack journalists, the stress. So I've got a couple of younger friends at Channel 4 and WIVB, and I don't know if they're being treated as well as I've been. At the end of my time at WIVB, it was not the best time for anybody, including me. But most of my career, I was allowed to have fun. And I said, if you get management that allows you to have some fun, and I know, James, you have some fun. I don't get to see you live too often, but and Troy would know how to have fun. I have no doubt of that. Even now, if he jumped back in front of the camera, it's loosey-goosey as much as you can afford to be. That's the beauty of TV weather, even for non-meteorologists, is we don't have teleprompters. And that's got to energize you to some point. You never know exactly what's going to come out of your mouth. And it keeps you, hopefully, more mentally alert. And of course, we all still have the problems of the anchors who didn't hear a word you just said. So when you're done, so it is going to snow Saturday.
Well, you know, Don, I gotta say this, that and Don, we talked in the pre-show, but not in the show. What a gentleman, Don. He in the pre-show said I was a gentleman. No, Don is the gentleman. I had many an AMS conference where James and Don and John Coleman and Pete Giddings and so many of the other people were there that did TV. And I, Don, what you say is so true. I think you have to be yourself. I mean, look at the guy we're with, that our host is, that helps to drive all this, James Spann, and what he does in the state of Alabama.
So every time I watch a video of James, I said, man, sorry, James, this sounds kind of kissy uppy, but man, this guy is good. And I'm not just talking about the meteorology. I mean, you're easy for me to watch, and you're genuine. And sometimes I see your remarks with rude people that you actually gently open up a little bit. So do I, but I'm mostly retired. I'm not sure I did when I was still working full time, but I admire you for that. You find a way to do it without totally destroying another human, at least as far as I know.
Yeah. Well, you know, Don, I just say what an honor it is for all of us tonight to be here with you. I've got to tell you, Don Paul, it is it's so great to see you. It's been a lot of years since I've seen you, and it's great to see you, my friend.
Well, ditto here. I was kind of nervous about this because, you know, some of my academic knowledge has been sloughing off at this stage.
I don't believe that for a second.
It's true with dual pole products. Let me tell you, that correlation coefficient, that's really something, use it or lose it. And when I was filling in at WIVB, and I did a couple of years at the ABC affiliate on weekends, I never had training on Max. And I couldn't even find those products on Macs. Well, now, I said, well, what if I need to use this? I'd have to go on my phone and get on Radar Pro.
Yep.
So
Yeah,
I'm insecure
Don,
about those things, and that's why I was nervous tonight.
Don, you're the best of the best. How can people follow you on social media? Where do you hang out? Twitter, Facebook? What you got?
Twitter and Facebook. Not much on Instagram. Most of my Instagram stuff are just occasional pretty pictures. I try to clue in some of my followers to people like Dakota Smith, my Weather Geek followers, the incredible imagery he puts, and lots of other good people too. And for climate, I say a good primer for everybody is climate.nasa.gov, because they write for the lay person, but it's generally world-class scientists who are writing the stuff. So, I'm still trying to educate a little bit, just with a smaller reach, I think, than I used to have.
But see, there you go, folks. I mean, Don Paul knows what Instagram is. I wouldn't know if it walked up and bit me in the butt right now. So,
well, and truth be told, Instagram would be better if all it was the occasional pretty picture. People trying to do too much with it now. It was better when it was just people taking pictures of, their,
my
cool
daughter's
stuff outside. Now it's just cat video.
Taught me what it was.
Okay.
All right. Well, Don, thank you so much. It's been an honor. Goodness gracious. I mean, we need to do this again soon. You were a great guest.
It has absolutely been an honor for me. And it turned out, besides my nervousness initially, will I even be able to hook up with you guys? I called Nate, because I have this history of screwing up Zoom, and
join the club.
Feel right at home, Don. Yeah, right here. Yeah.
This is the most fun I've had in a long time, folks.
Us too, Don.
Well, Don, thanks
Don.
so much. Great talking to you. Have a great week.
You too, James, and everybody else. And Nate, great seeing you again. And Troy.
Good to see you, buddy.
See ya. Bye.
All right. Thanks, Don. All right. Let's take a quick break. Tony is he did not get a report for us this week. He's had a very busy day, but Jen has This Week in Tornado History. We're going to come back and we'll talk with Bruce. We've got the weather roundup. We have another guest. We're going to talk about Hurricane Sally, picks of the week, and much more, all coming up as WeatherBrains rolls along.
This week in tornado history, we're going back to September 29th, 1966. The Storm Prediction Center database has one tornado on that day. It was an estimated F3 that moved through parts of the Cleveland, Ohio area. 22 people had minor injuries. There were no fatalities reported. Approximately 248 structures were damaged or destroyed. The tornado moved eastward near Warrensville Heights in North Randall. Per Thomas Grzoulis, in significant tornadoes, one home was, quote, nearly leveled. He also notes that the tornado was described as a big pillar. Per the storm data entry, this was the latest date of occurrence of a tornado in Cuyahoga County since the beginning of weather records in 1870. This record held until November 10th, 2002, when an F2 tornado in Summit County, Ohio, weakened to an F1 as it crossed into Cuyahoga County south of Glenwillow. You can read about this event and hundreds more on our website, tornadotalk.com, and get hooked on more tornado history with us by following us on Facebook and Twitter. You can also join the conversation on our Discord server.
Thank you for that, Jen. Always an interesting time when we talk about tornado history. Really fascinating time tonight, talking to Don Paul. What a legend. And another legend with us tonight, Bruce Jones. Bruce, we appreciate Midland sponsorship of WeatherBrains, and we appreciate you. We can't get through an interview. I don't think we have in over 700 and something shows, Bruce, where the guest hasn't mentioned weather radio somewhere in that discussion. This is just a part of the national weather lexicon. And you come here as a representative of Midland, but one thing you said to me from the beginning, you're here really as an ambassador of weather radio. Talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, early in my radio career, we used to be able to call the National Weather Service and they would give us a little 2-minute or 3-minute briefing on the day's weather. And I used to read that daily national summary that came out of the Severe Storms Forecast Center. And
we talked about that earlier too.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I loved reading that thing. The nation's high was in Bullhead City, Arizona, and the low was War Road, Minnesota, and that used to be part of the morning radio broadcast, was going through that national summary and then calling the National Weather Service office, and they would give us live on the telephone their updated forecast. This was back in the 70s. And I always appreciated the great job that the National Weather Service did. They, they do just a wonderful job, and they give away so much stuff for free. The satellite stuff you see on the internet and the radar stuff. And it's just a great organization. And then they've got this fantastic radio network, their own radio network with what's now more than 1,000 transmitters. And they give that away for free. You get this free signal. And so I always just had great admiration for the National Weather Service. And very early on in my career, I realized if I could get people to listen to that weather radio, as soon as it went off, they knew that on my radio or TV station, I was going to be there to walk them through the storm and help them out. So I've always thought that NOAA Weather Radio should just be in every single home. It should be just a no-brainer. I think when you buy your home, the realtor ought to hand you a weather radio. Here's your home, your housewarming gift. It's a NOAA Weather Radio. But anyway, yeah, I just always thought it was a great idea. And radio communication, the radio frequency is a great way to get signals out and get messages out. They go a long distance. You just plug this little device in. It just seems like a no-brainer to me. It always has. So
yeah,
I'm
right
happy to
there.
support
And you've
you.
got a special for all those realtors out there that need housewarming gifts.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for the segue,
they can
Bill.
really
Appreciate
save
it.
some overhead here real quickly. So,
Yeah. If you watch the WeatherBrains podcast or listen to the podcast, we do have a special offer. If you go to midlandusa.com and use the promo code SPAN15, you get 15% off on your weather radio purchases. So it's SPAN15, SPANN15, SPAN15. And when you type in that code, you can get 15% off your weather radio purchases. Just kind of our way of, helping spread the love. I honestly don't care.
Hey, Bruce.
what-
Hey, Bruce.
Yeah,
If you please explain that crank model, because I think a lot of people are familiar with the, WR120, the white weather radio. That's the gold standard. But this other model that you've got in this special, this is pretty good to have around for a lot of people.
Yeah, James, and especially in the hurricane zone where you think you might have to evacuate, this is a real good one to have because it has AM and FM and the weather radio in it, and it has a flashlight, and plus you can use it to recharge your smartphone. Because in this day and age, we're all addicted to our smartphone. Our cell phone has everything. It's a radio station, it's a radar scope, it's a telephone, it's this and that, messaging system. And if you lose that, you're in big trouble. And the fastest way to lose it is to have the battery go dead. So having a device like this, you can recharge that smartphone. So this is 5 of the items you're supposed to have in your Hurricane Go kit.
And I think what you said earlier, every realtor ought to hand a weather radio when they sell a house. This is the greatest thing I've heard tonight, maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, and I just think that's incredibly important. And I also think it's important for those people that live in mobile homes. Everybody that buys a manufactured home should get a weather radio as they move in.
Yeah, I agree. It should just be standard that you bought a mobile home, we're going to come set it up. It's set up. Oh, by the way, here are the keys to the front door, and here's your NOAA weather radio. Make sure you change the batteries once a year. But we'll keep preaching this, James. You and everybody on this podcast, please keep preaching this. People need to have multiple and redundant ways of getting these messages, and NOAA weather radio is still a good mode.
It sure is. Everybody has to have one. And again, a lot of you weather weenies that are listening to this, you've got one because you're a weather weenie, but we need you to be our evangelist to help spread the word so your neighbors and your friends and your family members will get one of these things, because you blink and the tornado season is going to be here down here in the Deep South. We kick it off in November. And I mean, we're almost into October here. And it's that time of the year. And I got a funny gut feeling the spring of next year might be pretty nasty too. So weather radio, get it.
There you go. Well, Bruce, thank you for your support of the show. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you guys too.
And tonight in the WeatherBrains hot seat, we've got a member of the family, someone we hadn't talked to in way too long. John Olshew, welcome back to the program. You there in Baldwin County, Alabama. Your home smells of rich mahogany. I can tell right there behind you.
I don't know.
He has
I don't-
many leather-bound books.
No. Man, they were kissing up to you, James. Golly, I want to tell that story from the McWayne Science Center when I came around the corner and you were puking. Just make you feel better.
I don't think I heard that
we have
story, LC. Maybe you
we
can
have
tell that
both seen each other almost throwing up. Now, I was puking.
Yeah.
But my old shoe story involves the River Chase Galleria storm alert meeting. Do you remember that one? Backstage.
Oh, that's when you made me drink the what was that?
No. I didn't make you drink it. I just suggested that you drink a bottle of A1, which you
It was
do
A1.
on a
That's
regular
right.
basis.
It was A1.
It was,
well, I drank,
it was one of these big restaurant, editions of A1, and you drank the whole thing. And for the first time, you got a little green.
Right, but I had done the catch up over at Starkville, and then we were doing ranch when we were up at Coleman. Yeah, I remember that.
This is the only meteorologist that drinks condiments. I mean, I'm just saying.
It's just boring, You're sitting there waiting to do a show, and everybody's kind of tense. It's like, heck, let's drink some condiments. What do you got around here?
In fact, if only he had a bottle of ketchup or mustard or barbecue sauce or steak sauce with him right now.
Just
we
looking
could do
at
it
your
live
eyes
on the
all
show.
No, but just looking at your eyes all bugged out when I came around that corner and you're hugging that toilet, puking, and telling me I was going to have to do the whole weather show there at the McWayne Science Center. Thousands of people. I can't do it, John. You're going to have to do it. Me, I'm third string quarterback, and it was like, oh my word, what am I going to do? But he wasn't going on. That was for sure.
It was a magical moment.
Yeah, it was.
Well, then there's that magical moment in Tuscaloosa, John. You just had this nose for tornadoes, and you're in the Hampton Inn parking lot, and the darn thing nearly got you. It scared me to death. I was in Birmingham.
Yeah, I've tried to explain that multiple times. James and I went to a conference right after that, 2001. I remember it because it was up in Spokane. It was right after the 9/11 stuff, and it was the first time I'd flown. And we went up there, and all those meteorologists sat around and ripped me apart. The thing is, James, he just kind of went, yeah. But yeah, these guys probably don't know. I took our new $500,000 storm van and parked it in front of a F4 tornado in December of 2000 and had it completely destroyed. And the thing was, the tornado, tornadoes southwest to northeast. Well, that's true 96% of the time. Every once in a while, I like to go west to east. And that was one time this little F4 decided to do this little deviation for about 10 miles. And then, anyway, I couldn't explain it. I was all of, 30 years old, 29 years old. And, I tore up a $500,000 storm van, but they kept me employed. How did you manage that, James? How did you let them keep me after I tore that up?
I know people.
Well, John, you're down there in Baldwin County, Alabama. Just took a hard hit from Hurricane Sally, of course, and we were, of course, watching this happen. Talk about the recovery, and talk about the reaction to the storm there in the local communities that were so hard hit.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know where to start. First off, we actually live about 5 miles down to the south and east of Fairhope. So we were even closer than Fairhope was. And there's a lot of trees down here. I mean, you had where we were about 15 inches of rain. Over near Ono Island, they had 30 inches of rain. This was over about a 36-hour period. And then you had, 4 or 5 hours of hurricane force winds. A lot of people down here, arguing about them having tornadoes now. Some of the pines, we have big southern pines down here versus normal type of pine tree. If you don't know what a southern pine is, it doesn't have any branches and it goes up about 50 feet and then it has a bush kind of up at the top.
Right.
And a lot of those were snapped. So you got a lot of people who want to say, oh, well, we had a tornado. James and I used to fight this in the weather, the storm alert sessions. Everybody wants to claim they had a tornado when they don't understand straight line winds of 100 miles per hour, do the same thing. It's just, I don't know. I guess it's prestige or something, but I've had about how there had to be a tornado where they were. But yeah, so here's the deal. And James, I saw your post earlier about this. And so don't get mad if I'm going to analyze that a little bit. So you talked about Monday afternoon about what the discussion was and what the problem, what the storm might be a category.
Right.
2.
And let me call a timeout real quick.
Yeah.
So people will know what we're talking about. there has been a lot of criticism of the weather enterprise and the emergency management officials from people on the Alabama Gulf Coast, in that they were not properly prepped for the hurricane. They were not told what to do. They didn't get the mandatory evacuation. The weather people were wrong. It was a Category 3. There was clearly something that went wrong in the communication process.
Well,
And I'm trying to get constructive criticism on what is it that went wrong? What can we do better? And so I threw that out there today, and there's like hundreds of responses, and I will read all of them.
Right.
So that's kind of why I did that. And that's where we kind of morph into you, John. I mean,
right.
A lot
And
of
so
people in Baldwin County felt like something they weren't told the truth about the thing.
Yeah. So I'm just going to give you my personal story and what happened with me, and you can take this any way you want to. Okay. So as a meteorologist or weather liar, whatever you want to call me, I have my family down here, and I saw the same numbers that you did Monday. And I said, Lynn, we wake up tomorrow and this is the same thing on Tuesday morning. You've got to evacuate. I'll stay here, but I'm going to send you to Jackson or Tuscaloosa or something. So I woke up Tuesday morning and they started to back off on it. It was not 105 mile per hour storm anymore. And by Tuesday afternoon, we're looking at an 85 mile per hour storm coming inland. Now still moving slow, but I said, okay, well, let's try to ride this out. And I think what happened here may be part of the equation, James. We had an 85 mile per hour storm on the 4 p.m. advisory. We lost power at 7 p.m. So people are starting to lose power. They say, okay, well, yeah, we knew we were going to lose power. Let's go on and go to sleep. This is going to be an 85 mile per hour storm. And I looked up the force multiplier on an 85 mile per hour storm versus a 105 mile per hour storm. And you know what the difference is? 16 times.
Yep.
So you're supposed to have 16 times the amount of damage that you have from an 85 mile per hour storm up to a 105 mile per hour storm. So I think that's where people, and you have these guys who say, oh, I'll stay through unless it's a Category 4 or a Category 5. And most of those people have never been through an eye wall. They were sitting on the last storm that they went through. They were sitting way on the outside feeder band or something, and they think they've been. So I think you've got a lot of that down here. People who said they were going to ride through it, they've been through a hurricane before, and we had a big old eye. I still don't know how that storm had that big of an eye on it, and it came in. And so you've got a lot of areas that are in the eye wall. And, I think you were up, James, when I sent you this. We started getting, reports off the Doppler stuff, up 5,000 feet of 127 miles an hour, trying to translate that down to the surface. That's kind of when I knew in my head that this was not going to be, this was going to be a surprise for people. It just came in. It had a lot bigger wind field up above 100 miles an hour, 90 miles an hour. And so it did. It just surprised people. You got these old salts down here who want to ride through hurricanes, who want to protect their property, who like I said, they always grade it with Frederick or Ivan or whatever. And to be honest with you, a lot of the areas that went through that over in Mobile and even here in Baldwin County with some of those, a lot of those people were out on the feeder bands. Now, of course, Dauphin Island went through the eye wall with Frederick, but yeah, I sympathize a little bit with the people. But here, as far as the EMA and all the meteorologists, and it's your forecast is only as good as the information or data that you have. And there wasn't anything, looking at it as I looked at it and you looked at everybody else, we would have called it the same way. There was supposed to be upwelling, there was supposed to be dry air intrusion, and something, and the steering currents collapsed. So there was never a really well-defined model. The models kept jumping around with it when they were trying to lock onto it. So there were a lot of things that were going into that were going to be a problem anyway. But I would love to see when the guys who make 6 figures or 7 figures and know a lot more than me and have PhDs in front of their names and everything start analyzing this. I want to know why that storm got there on the continental shelf. And I mean, part of the answer probably is, well, it sat so long over the shallow water that upwelling didn't matter. It was just pulling up water that was a degree or two cooler than what it had normally had. But like I said, I'd love to know what happened, where we were looking at an 85 mile per hour storm at 4 p.m. And then by the 10 p.m. advisory, we're talking about a Category 2, 105 mile per hour. I think that's where everybody got caught flat footed.
Well, John, one thing that Troy here,
Yeah.
one thing I think that we sometimes could do a better job with, and I had an interview this week that asked about this, is that I don't think the public understands that the National Hurricane Center folks are probably best at their track stuff. We're still not quite where we need to be on intensity stuff. And they admit that. The National Hurricane Center meteorologists admit that. That's where we get our real surprises. And I don't think the public really understands that. And then it comes down, as John points out, to critical think. What did John do? He made a critical thinking decision. And when you're making those sort of decisions, to know that the strength is, I'll tell you, the Weather Service and National Hurricane Center does a damn good job, I think. But it's one of the weaknesses. It is one of the weaknesses, that strength in.
Yeah, Ken Graham is an old college buddy of mine. He runs National Hurricane Center now. The problem, with what was going on there is that they're the victim of their own success.
Yep.
We have had hurricane tracks and hurricane intensity forecasts that have been just gorgeous over the last few years. I mean, it was almost where, that's kind of when I talk to people, they got to where they trusted the NHC so much that when you get this kind of quasi area where there's a storm that's got weak currents and all of a sudden you have this slow moving storm that intensifies, they forget that used to happen a lot, and it hasn't happened in recent memory a lot. So anyway, I think they do a great job, and because they do a great job, when you have a kind of an outlier like this, you're going to get some criticism.
Yep.
So.
I thought, John, that the Hurricane Center did a good job of presenting uncertainty in their products. They really did. They don't focus on that center line. There's a lot of uncertainty here. What can we do to better communicate the impact, the uncertainty, the whole package after coming through this thing? What's some advice that you can impart wisdom? Because that's what I'm looking for. I'm just looking. And again, when I go in there and look for constructive criticism, I mean that. What can we do better? If you could go back and do this all over again, John, what would you do differently when it comes to communicating with the public?
Well, it goes back to what I said. You start to get to the point where you think computers, models, forecasters are infallible if they've got a good track record. It's like in baseball. Heck, the guy starts hitting, you think he's the best thing since sliced bread, and then he's going to hit a slump, or he's going to have face a new pitch, whatever. And this is just me. Like I said, I'm not in the weather business anymore. I'm just a guy, who likes to, make my own forecast, armchair quarterback and everything. But, I got to where, I like the line. This cone uncertainty, why do we even need it? They're so good now. Why do we even need to look at that? And you also got kind of into this, I don't know, every morning we would wake up and hear a different landfall. We went from the middle of Louisiana and then started backing up east every day. And then we started hearing, okay, well, the intensity is not going to be a problem. It's probably going to, and you're right. James, you said Monday they had it up as a storm over 100 miles per hour, but then, you come into Tuesday afternoon, they've got it back down to 85. We're talking about upwelling and dry air. And so, a lot of these guys just, like I said, they want to ride out the storm. Hey, the track's not directly over me, so I'm going to be fine. And they just got caught flat-footed with that. But it's not any of the EMA or the local meteorologist, or it's nobody's fault. It could not have turned out a different way. The models were spitting out what they were spitting out, and how does it get better? Like I said, it's going to be some PhD who figures out what exactly went wrong with that upwelling. Heck, I looked at the water vapor, saw dry air all over on the west side of that storm, and thought it was, it's a goner.
I guess it behooves everyone to remember that weather forecasting is a non-perfect science. Put that as the title for tonight's program. We've got to remember that there are going to be things that we miss, and we have to depend on people, like John points out, to make critical thinking and smart decisions on behalf of themselves. Now, John, I don't know what you saw down there in Fairhope or that area in southern Alabama, but if we could send an emergency management person to every house, and we could hold their hand and tell them what to do, but that's not going to be happening. So we have to depend on people at home. And this is what goes over toward Bruce's job. You give them a weather radio to help them make decisions based upon this. But folks, if you think that we're going to be issuing weather forecast guarantees anytime real soon, you're probably sadly mistaken. I'm sorry, James.
This is the verbiage that the Hurricane Center used over and over and over. In every package, it said, given the uncertainty in the timing and location of the northward turn and the lack of well-defined steering currents, don't focus on the exact forecast track or the specific timing and location of landfall. Hurricane force winds, dangerous storm surge, and flooding rainfall will affect a large portion of the Gulf Coast during the next few days. And I don't think we communicated that very effectively. And I don't think people dig down and read this stuff that you post. They want to hear it from Alan Seals or John Oldshoe and say it. And maybe we just didn't do an adequate job of saying that.
So I'm not hearing as much as the track was an issue. Now, it was moving east every day, and so there was a lot of uncertainty with that. What I'm hearing is about the strength. And so I want to read to you a line from the 4 p.m. discussion on Tuesday. All right. And as a semi-meteorologist, this is what I was kind of keying on when I was talking to people behind the scenes. So let me read this line to you.
And wait, John, you're not a semi-meteorologist. You are a meteorologist. Don't remove yourself from this.
The combination of upwelling and moderate westerly shear is likely to result in little change in strength prior to Sally moving on shore. Once the center of the hurricane moves on shore, rapid weakening is expected, and global models indicate circulation will become elongated on a frontal boundary in 3 to 4 days. So that was with an 85 mile per hour forecast that was going in there. And so, you know, as somebody who's advising some people behind the scenes, and I'm sure that the broadcast meteorologists were reading that too, you know, they're signaling, they're talking, the way their verbiage is going to go off of that. So we have, from, like I said, from my perspective, I want to read that paper when it comes out. What happened? You know, where we went away from that verbiage there.
So hey, John, I'm sorry, James. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Bill. You take it.
Talk about the reaction to the surge, John, because the Hurricane Center was calling for 4 to 6 feet on the Alabama coast at 4 o'clock that day, 3 to 5 in the Pensacola Bay region. And they stuck with that forecast, except raised it a little bit in Escambia Bay in that area later that night. But it seemed like Pensacola was really surprised by that extra 1 foot. Yeah. When we were telling people on Monday in Milton to get the heck out based on a Category 2 storm, right, you know, the possibility of it, and they evacuated. And sure enough, they had 3 feet above dry ground in Milton, and they were so thankful. So what was the reaction in Orange Beach and Gulf Shores and those places where it looked like Hurricane Katrina to me? You know,
I'll be honest with you, Bill. I've got a couple of places down that way, and went and checked on them, and my sister lives on Ono Island, so I've been over there, and it was not as bad as I expected. I think, and I don't think I've gotten to the eastern eye wall. I think that's probably just inside of Florida. We did try to drive over to Florida, to Pensacola, and there was too much debris in the road, and they were turning people around. So I don't know if I'm the best to talk about that. They did get a storm surge there on Ono Island, but it was actually from, what was that? From the northerly wind when it was moving to the east, it brought it up and over them on that northerly wind. And that's a strange thing with hurricanes. Each one is different on where your position is, what the strength of the storm is, how long did it sit over you, those types of things. I don't think anybody thought it would be this bad in Fairhope, but something got into that, some type of wind maximum got into the north central part of that eye wall. And, you know, with 15 inches of rain, it just dropped trees everywhere.
I think it had something to do with mesovortices within the eye wall, just my opinion, but I'm not one of these 7-figure researchers. I would love to find that 7-figure researcher guy. But let me ask you this, John. I mean, are we focused too much on these numbers? Because I hear that a lot. Oh, it was just supposed to be a 1 or a 2. They're hung up in these numbers, and maybe we should focus more on the impact instead of the numbers. I don't know.
And you ought to hear the people down here trying to say that they had 120 mile per hour wind gusts. There was one report of 121 mile per hour wind gust, and it was on a platform at the Fort Morgan State Park that was 119 feet in the air. So it's like, guys, you didn't have 120 mile per hour winds at your house. Now you may have had sustained winds of 90 and maybe a 99 mile per hour gust or whatever, but there are a lot of folks down here that just want to one up each other. And so, I think they concentrate on too much trying to say, well, this was a lot. No, the numbers were right when, with that 10 p.m. advisory that came out. It was the storm. Now, it may have moved. I hadn't gone back and looked, but it may have moved a little bit slower. It sure felt like it when you go through 4 or 5 hours worth of 90 mile per hour winds. you wonder when it's going to end. It's just we just it started about 2 p.m. here, or 2 a.m. I'm sorry, and it wasn't really calming down to about 7 a.m. I could finally get out, and we had 10 huge massive oaks all around our house. But here's one weird thing that once again, we'll get that 7-figure researcher to figure this out. We did not have that many trees actually fall on houses. And the only thing I could think is that people put down here, and maybe they do it in other places, but they put the trees on the southern side of the house to block out the sun. And so when we were getting an easterly wind, it was blowing those trees so they were parallel to the house. They weren't perpendicular to the house, if that makes any sense. So a lot less damage of trees going through houses than I would have expected.
John, my pick of the week for next week is about the fortified roofs. It seems like there's 16,000 of them in Mobile and Baldwin counties, and they did pretty well from what I hear.
Yeah, I saw that report. that they put out, and they talked to that guy that was down in Gulf Shores, Orange Beach, who had just put it on. And there's supposed to be a grant program for that. I think it's clogged up right now because so many people applied for it, but I think it gives them $10,000 to replace a roof, and a fortified roof will cost $20,000. So it'll bring it down to the price of a normal roof. So it'd be interesting if they get that funded up again. Insurance down here is crazy from the storms coming in. When we had that time period back during, with Katrina and Ivan and all of those, it just drove up the wind rates down here crazy. And we just had people. So we have a state wind pool now that most houses are in that they designated, but we had some private insurers that were starting to creep back into the market. I'm wondering if they're going to completely disappear again. So I don't know.
That fortified program, because we had them on the WeatherBrains program, James. They got them lined up out the door now because of us.
Yeah, baby, come on. So there was an evacuation recommendation for a couple of zones
1 and 2. Yeah,
right. Did anybody evacuate?
It was that mixed messaging of waking up Monday and we got to get everything. And then, by Monday night and Tuesday, hey, maybe this isn't going to be that bad. It's not mandatory. Maybe we're not going to go, And so, it was just a calamity of trying to figure out that intensity. And there was just that. I think it's going to come back to the continental shelf. That's my opinion. It's just that that water column, when you have a storm churn up the water column, but the water column's only 25 or 50 feet deep, it doesn't matter, But that's just
me. And the other question, people say, well, there should have been a mandatory evacuation. Do people actually follow mandatory evacuations? Would there be any difference? I don't think there is much of a difference if it's a mandatory or recommended.
I think they had a mandatory on Dawson Island. A lot of times that, for some reason, I'm trying to remember why, but it gets flooded a lot easier than Fort Morgan and Gulf Shores and Orange Beach. And so a lot of times they'll mandatorily evacuate that, and they follow it then. No, I think mandatory evacuations are followed, but you give somebody the option, they're going to try to figure out how they can stay here and guard whatever's in their house, which I always find funny. It's like, you can replace any of this. We are gifted down here. I look at it as a game. Tornadoes, you get 10 minutes worth of warning. Hurricanes, heck, sometimes you even get 3 days worth of warning that it's coming, and so people always say, well, do you like living on the Gulf Coast? Aren't you worried about hurricanes? No, it's just stuff. If it's bad enough, we're going to get out of Dodge and we might come back and it'll be a slab, but we were able to get out, So people follow the mandatory evacuations. It was that optional, I think, where the old timers and just everybody kind of said, oh, now it's just going to be, a minimal hurricane. We'll stay.
Well,
that sounds like
John,
it's the kind of the cutoff there is that category 2, category 3. That looks like the magic cutoff.
Well, I even thinking of category 2, yeah, it was right there. It was getting there. I mean, if the numbers that we had Tuesday night had been in, on Tuesday afternoon or Tuesday morning, it might have been a different story. But it just, I'm not sure you can go from 85 miles per hour at 4 p.m. to 105 mile per hour storm at 10 p.m. and everybody's lost power at some point during that time and expect them to do anything. I mean, they're going to have to hunker down.
John, the question I have is a mandatory evacuation is a mandatory evacuation. I would say that 2020 is a unique year for a mandatory evacuation. The government wants me to leave. Yeah, we'll see about that. You can't even agree the sun rises in the east right now. And as we kidded about on this show before, and I know in the state of Texas, John, that you cannot have a mandatory evacuation. There's no one there forced at gunpoint that has to leave. You can't do it in the state of Texas.
Well, I'll tell you a weird thing, Troy. Hurricane Sally cured COVID because nobody was wearing masks for the last 10 days when we were going into sports. They figured if Hurricane Sally hadn't gotten them, COVID wasn't going to get them either. So they were done with masks. So.
But real quick, and I know we got to move on in a second. The other criticism I'm hearing, they're accusing us of a cover-up because Sally created more damage than Ivan, and Ivan was a 3, and Sally was a 2. And how would you? Again, I went down right after Ivan, and I saw just catastrophic damage of these structures. I mean, condominiums on the beach in Florida and Alabama, and it was just, and the damage inland was just extreme. And again, I'm not blaming anybody. I'm not blaming the people. I understand what they went through was hellacious down there. I've been through these things, but what's your opinion on that, John? Was the damage as bad as Ivan, at least where you are?
Well, I think it was specifically where I am, which, like I said, is about 5 miles down to the south and east of Fairhope. I think it was a little bit worse, and I think that's the character of hurricanes. You can't blanket them. Yes, they might come in at the same area, but they don't come in to the exact mile point. And so, if I remember correctly on Ivan, correct me if I'm wrong, it moved pretty quick, right? It came in, was a quick hit, right?
Oh yeah. It was trucking.
We had 5 hours, 90 mile per hour winds, and it was up here off the coast. And so it was in these trees if you ever go down to the Alabama Gulf Coast, there aren't any trees down there. It's a bunch of sand and sand dunes. Okay. So you get up here where we've got these massive oaks on the eastern shore in Fairhope and Magnolia Springs and in Foley and over to Lillian and Alberta and all that. Yeah, those got 15 inches of rain on them. They were subjected to 90 mile per hour winds for 4 hours. They're going to start falling. And that's what happened. And so I think there's this disconnect. You've also had a lot of new people move in. What was Ivan, 15 years ago? You've had a lot. What? Yeah, 2004. Yeah, so you've had the population increase of Baldwin County by 40% since then. So that's 40% people who haven't ever been through a storm. So yeah, this is going to be the worst storm to them. So I think you got some of that going on.
Okay. And again, if Kim was here, and also this, in addition to being a physical science question, like John's question, it's also a social science question, which is what Kim does. And I would love to hear her input. And I do know that there is a researcher, I want to say at the University of South Florida, that is working with Laura Myers, and she asked me to put out these survey links, and they're already collecting data on these things we're talking about. And what they can do is take all this data and assimilate that data and present it to us in a way that can help us be better. And that's all I want to do. And again, I want to stress this for anybody that's listening in Mobile or Baldwin counties, Alabama. There is nobody in the weather enterprise is being critical of people. We're just trying to get a response so we can be better next time.
Yeah. And you did the great work with that, after the 2011 tornado in Tuscaloosa, trying to figure out the social media aspect, James. And I hope we do that with this storm too.
Yeah, and Kim hopefully will be back with us next week. She could not be on the show tonight, but yeah, there's a lot going on here. All right, so we don't have Aubrey for an email segment. She says I can't jump back. We're setting a few new shots in the studio. Ooh, so we'll do a double email segment next week. So we're going to jump right into picks of the week. This is where we go around the horn. Everybody shares something that is weather related. This can be an article, website, data site, hardware, software, anything like that. So I can do this for about 2 more minutes. So let's go to Troy. I know, Troy, you've got a pick of the week you would like to share.
Yeah, I kind of found, now that I've spoiled, and by the way, a great story from Nate in just a couple of seconds, but actually interesting part of the week in review, in a sense, from the American Meteorological Society this week was a great article. Sandra Irwin wrote it in Space News, and it was talking about GOES 13, that old satellite that was retired a number of years ago, actually being repurposed now by the military over the Indian Ocean. And so that's my pick of the week. I thought that was an interesting article. Nice to see those old satellites being repurposed somewhat. In this case, for the U.S. Space Force, I think, is who they say officially is monitoring the Indian Ocean with that old hardware.
Awesome. And again, all of these links will be up on the website, weatherbrains.com. Mine, it is a piece in Scientific American called Migrating Tornadoes Bring Heightened Danger to the Southeast. And it's a long read, but it's a good read. And I think it's got a lot of accuracies in there that we all need to talk about. And we have talked about on the show with some of the researchers that have kind of highlighted some potential shift in tornado occurrence from the traditional Tornado Alley into Dixie Alley. But anyway, I thought that was a good read. And on that note, Bill, I got to turn the floor over to you because I have to go change and be in Studio A in a moment. So go, Bill.
Well, thank you, James. Nate, a great time to segue to you. Great guest tonight with Don joining us from Buffalo. He was fantastic. Thanks for getting him. And so he was a great pick. Give us your pick of the week.
Pick of the week is some good news. If James had stuck around, I was going to have him roll the breaking news thing, but he's not here anymore, so we'll roll with it. But David Finfrock is fine. That's the breaking news. He got bit by a snake this morning. He was actually out doing some cleanup work with a nature conservancy, of which he is a board member, and was pulling some brush away, and all of a sudden sees a 4-foot rattlesnake chomping through his jeans. And good news is it appears to have been a dry bite. I didn't realize that was a thing, but apparently the snake realized who it had bit and thought better of it. Didn't want to be a belt and decided just to let go with just a little nibble. So blood tests were negative for any sort of venom. David was released from the ER. He's home resting comfortably now, and hopefully we'll be back on the air soon. But he's just one of the nicest human beings you'll ever meet. Really, really smart guy. Has been doing TV weather in the Dallas market for decades. A privilege to have him on our team, and we're glad he's no worse for wear with an encounter from one of Texas's little rattlesnakes. He says apparently that he has a ranch. Those of you know David, he has a ranch and works a ranch and has run into rattlesnakes before, and they usually will tell you, "Hi, I'm here." And that one apparently did not. Maybe it was cold this morning. I don't know. But anyway, everything seems to be just fine.
Wow,
that's my pick.
That's really good that he's okay, and that's great. We'll have to put him in the hot seat here in the next couple of weeks, Nate.
Yep.
And hear about his experience. Thank you for that, Nate. Jen, you've got next week's guest. Why don't you give us a little preview of what we're going to be talking about next week, and give us your pick of the week.
You bet. Yeah. Just a gentleman that I highly admire is Lon Curtis, and he will be on with us next week. And I'm just so excited to hear about some of the things that he's been working on. He actually just was part of a conference where he did some presentations about winter tornadoes in Texas. And he has done a lot of writing for Tornado Talk and is going to continue to do so. And he and I are working on a write up together. I'm not going to spoil it, but we're going to write a summary together. And oh, you lost my mic?
Yeah, you've gotten a little distant there.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Sounds like we might be listening to built-in, but anyway, we'll boost it in post.
Okay, sounds good. But yeah, he's on next week, and I'm excited. He's going to talk about Gerald and all kinds of stuff. And my pick of the week is actually a waterspout / tornado that came upon Myrtle Beach on Friday. And so I got a tweet from that video, and people were on the beach, umbrellas flying. It was crazy. So that is my pick of the week.
I bet you know Lon Curtis, Bruce Jones. I bet you've known him for a while.
Yeah.
I'm sure you might want to join us early next week.
Absolutely. That Gerald, Texas tornado was something. Bruce Thomas used to always talk about Gerald, Texas, because he was on the air in Waco during the Gerald, Texas tornado. He has quite a story to tell about that. For my pick of the week, unfortunately, another sad headline: the Salem, Oregon Statesman Journal newspaper. The headline is "Completely Botched. Failed emergency alerts raise questions for future disasters." And once again, people were relying on one method of receiving warnings. They didn't get them with the Oregon wildfires, and there was loss of life and property out there. So it's in the Statesman Journal. Headline is "Completely Botched. Failed emergency alerts raise questions for future disasters."
It's just sad what's happening out there, but some hopeful things for the warning process in the future there. So keep beating the drum, Bruce Jones. All right, who have I missed? Troy, we got you, right?
I think our friend John.
Yeah, no, coming back to John here in just a second. But got checked off everybody. John Olshu, I've stalled as long as I can. I know you're not hurting for a pick of the week. So
I was sitting here thinking, because it's kind of putting me on the spot. If you want to drop in on a community that's gone through a hurricane and kind of just see some of the request and the things that are going on, I run a little Facebook page called fairhopenow.com. If you type in fairhopenow.com, it redirects you into the Facebook group, and you can drop in there, and hopefully I'll get the link to the social science question too, and I'll put it in there for people to from Fairhope to respond to. But it's good, it's neat. They've got a lot of people with damaged pictures, a lot of people asking about things. We were without power for about a week, and so everybody was keeping up with the linemen. We had a lineman parade down here where we celebrated those guys getting us power back, and so it's a neat little thing if you want to drop in there for a night or two and just see what's happening in post Hurricane Sally world.
And John, you got a standing invite. This place is always got a welcome before you here.
Well, I'll come back some. There are a lot of new faces here. Glad you guys welcomed me like you did, and it's been a long time since I've been on air, so I have to improve my voice again so I can sound professional like all these guys.
You sound great. It's good to hear your voice and good to have you with us tonight. And thank you for your analysis of that. Doesn't take a hurricane to get you back on the show next time.
No, I'll try to get in here whenever you need me.
Yeah, my pick of the week is an episode of Weather Geeks that featured our own very famous Troy Kimmel. Outstanding show with Marshall here in the last couple of weeks. It's outstanding. You need to go back and watch it. And I owe a little apology. Last week I made some offhanded comment at the end of the show, not being very sensitive to our listeners about the possibility of a hurricane coming out of the Western Caribbean here the first week of October. And one of our listeners, Maurice Rose out of New Orleans, took umbrage to that and said that upset a lot of folks that were listening to the show that night. And I agree with him. I shouldn't have said that. While there is the possibility that we'll deal with some tropical mischief in the Western Caribbean and it might get into the Gulf of Mexico, we don't know where it's going to go. That was not, I was, doing what we caution against a lot, which is forecasting out 384 hours, and that's not a good idea. So I wanted Maurice and anybody else who was offended by my comment that night to accept my sincere apology. Just want you to keep an eye out because it is 2020 and Lord knows what's coming next. So now they got brain-eating amoebas down there, Troy, and parts of Houston and everything else. You can't even get on a slip and slide. It's unsafe now.
It's already apparent that it's already eaten my brain. So that happened a long time ago. So
that hit me about 45 years ago. Yeah. Well, anything else we need to bring before this august body here tonight, John Olshu?
I got nothing, Bill. It's your show. What do you got?
All right. Well, I'll take Nate Johnson. I'd take a motion that we adjourn then.
I'm going to let Troy make it because that's his thing.
All right.
I'd like to make the motion, my esteemed
Second.
colleague, Bill Murray.
All right,
that
there we go. I've
we
got
break it. Yeah.
And a second, and I bet I've got a unanimous consent. Well, WeatherBrains is the weekly netcast. It's all about weather. We do this on Monday nights. Next week we'll have Lon Curtis here, and James Adelot is going to join us as a guest panelist next week. That's really exciting. I just noticed that. That's going to be a lot of fun. And I'm trying to reach out to. We've had a last minute shift on the October 12th show. Trying to get Brantley Hargrove, the author who wrote the book about Tim Samaras. I've reached out to him, but if any of you guys have got any contacts with him, it would be nice to have him fill in for that October 12th show, because I've wanted to have him on for a couple of years. But generally, we're here on Monday nights. You can hear us, listen to us, watch us, any of the normal places that you get podcasts. But until next week, when Lon Curtis is going to be our guest, I'm guest booking officer Bill Murray. And until I see you again next week, have a great week. And as I always tell you, keep an eye to the sky, because you'll always have something fun to look at. Thank you, John.
Hey, thanks, Bill. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, John. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Jen.
Good to see y'all.
Thanks, Troy.
Bye,
Take care.
guys.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's a wrap for WeatherBrains. That was great fun having Don Paul, John Oldshoe on the show tonight. Very interesting discussion, but I got to go, guys. Thank you all for watching. If you're new to this, we do this every Monday night, typically at 8 o'clock Central Time, and we'll be back next Monday night for the first October show of 2020. We'll see you guys then. Thank you all for watching. Have a great week, and God bless.